Nighty night. Welcome back. Today I'm going to tell you a story about the horror of being alone at home. Night had fallen and I sat alone in the living room. The dim and oppressive light inside the house barely pushed back the creeping shadows. Outside, the wind howled softly, rattling the windows, accompanied by the occasional cries of stray cats. Their meows were unsettling, more like wails, filled with an anxious tension that was impossible to ignore. It was supposed to be an ordinary night, or at least it should have been. I lived in an old apartment building, nearly devoid of neighbors. Especially at night, the building was eerily quiet. My friends had gone out to a party, but I had chosen to stay home because of work the next day. It didn't seem like a big deal. I was used to being alone, and after living in this city for so long, the quiet of the night had become a comforting background sound to me. Curled up on the couch, I held a freshly brewed cup of coffee, the TV playing some mindless show in front of me. My eyes lazily followed the screen, but my mind wasn't focused on the program. I picked up my phone, scrolled through social media a bit, then set it back down. Something didn't feel quite right, but I couldn't put my finger on it. The whole evening carried a strange sense of oppression, like there was something unseen in the air, something that hovered just behind me, gently brushing against my back. I shook my head, trying to dismiss the feeling, telling myself it was just fatigue. It's normal to feel a little uneasy at night. I tried to concentrate on the TV again, but suddenly, I heard a faint knocking sound from above. Thud, thud. I froze, my heartbeat quickening. The sound came from upstairs, but I distinctly remembered that the tenant on that floor had moved out, and no new residents had moved in yet. There shouldn't be anyone up there. Holding my breath, I stared at the ceiling, listening carefully for the noise. After a few seconds, there it was again. Thud, thud. This time it was clearer, as if something, or someone, was slowly, methodically knocking on the floor above. But there shouldn't be anyone in that empty apartment. A chill ran down my spine and I almost dropped my coffee. Instinctively, I reached for my phone to call the building manager or the police, but my fingers hovered over the dial. Maybe it was just my imagination. Perhaps it was something outside, a stray animal or a tree branch hitting the wall. I tried to convince myself, but the growing fear gnawing at my gut was undeniable. Just as I debated whether to make the call, the knocking stopped. The room fell back into silence, a silence so deep I could hear my own heartbeat. I told myself it was nothing, just the natural sounds of an old building. This kind of thing had happened before, and it had always turned out to be something minor. After a while, I started to feel calmer. I stood up, deciding to grab a snack from the kitchen to soothe my nerves. As I walked through the hallway, my steps unconsciously became lighter, as though I didn't want to disturb something. I opened the fridge, took out some cookies, and turned to head back to the living room. But as I passed the hallway again, something caught my eye, a faint crack in the door leading to my bedroom at the far end. It was slightly ajar. That door should have been closed, I was certain of it. My heart sank and my mind raced. Had something gotten into the house? But I had locked all the doors and windows. There was no way anyone could have entered. I held my breath, staring at the gap in the door. Through the narrow slit, I could see a dim corner of the bedroom, but nothing seemed out of place. The lack of visible disturbance made it even more unnerving. I didn't know what compelled me, perhaps curiosity or fear, but I slowly walked towards the door, my trembling fingers reaching for the handle, my mind in disarray. Just as I was about to push the door open, I heard a faint giggle behind it. It was soft, almost inaudible, like the quiet laugh of a small child. Hee. The sound was so faint it was almost imperceptible, but in the dead quiet of the house, it rang out like a sharp knife cutting through the silence. A cold sweat broke out across my body, and I nearly tripped over the couch in my panic. Something is very wrong. I started breathing heavily, feeling as if I were teetering on the edge of madness. I grabbed my phone again, this time intent on calling the police, but just as my fingers touched the dial, the screen flickered a few times before going completely black. Damn it. I tried rebooting the phone, but no matter how many buttons I pressed, there was no response, as if something was interfering with it. I began to realize that this situation was far beyond my understanding. I jumped to my feet and rushed towards the front door, desperate to leave this unsettling apartment. But when I reached for the doorknob, it wouldn't budge. The lock seemed jammed and no amount of force could turn it. Then the knocking resumed, louder and more frantic this time. But it wasn't just from upstairs anymore. The sound seemed to come from everywhere, the ceiling, the floor, even the walls. Thud, thud, thud. I desperately twisted the doorknob, but it wouldn't move. Panic set in as my heart raced, pounding so loudly it nearly drowned out the eerie knocking. And then the giggling voice returned, this time much closer, as if it were whispering directly into my ear. Why haven't you come out yet? I recoiled from the door in terror, nearly stumbling over my own feet. The giggling grew louder, more mocking, and I could feel its presence closing in around me. I spun around, but the room was still empty, the air thick with a chilling presence. I backed into a corner, curling up on the floor, unable to tear my eyes away from the bedroom door. Suddenly, the door creaked open as though pushed by some invisible force. The hinges let out a faint groan, and the footsteps shifted into rapid thuds, heading straight toward me. Enough. This isn't real. I screamed, trying to break the nightmare's hold over me. But my voice sounded weak, hollow. Desperately, I scanned the room, looking for anything I could use to defend myself. And then the footsteps stopped. Whatever it was, it had come closer, yet remained unseen. But I could feel it there, watching me as though a pair of cold, invisible eyes were locked onto me. I braced myself, preparing to flee, but the chilling sensation only grew stronger, as if an invisible hand were slowly stroking the back of my neck. Every hair on my body stood on end, and I gasped for breath as the pressure mounted in my chest. Go, just go. I kept repeating to myself, trying to muster the courage to move, but fear had frozen my legs. I couldn't move an inch. Suddenly, the bedroom door swung wide open with a deafening crash, as if someone had violently pushed it. I fell backward, collapsing onto the floor, eyes wide with terror as I stared at the door. Beyond it, there was nothing but impenetrable darkness, an endless void. But in that void, I could feel something staring back at me. I tried to scramble to my feet, but my legs shook uncontrollably, refusing to cooperate. As I lay there, trembling, a low, eerie voice echoed from the darkness, as if someone far away was whispering, yet the sound was disturbingly clear. Finally, see. The voice seemed to come from all directions, impossible to pinpoint. I scanned the room in terror, but there was nothing except that overwhelming, suffocating fear. Then, from within the darkness behind the door, a vague shape began to emerge. No, it's not possible, this can't be real, I muttered, trying to convince myself it was all an illusion, but the figure continued to solidify. It was a shadowy, amorphous figure, floating silently in the air as if it had crawled out of the blackness itself. Its form was grotesquely unnatural, constantly shifting and contorting, never settling into one shape. My heart nearly stopped as I stared, paralyzed with fear. My fingers clawed at the floor, trying desperately to push myself away from it. You can see it now, the voice whispered again, this time so close I could almost feel its icy breath on my skin. The shadow loomed nearer, each step like a needle piercing my nerves. The fear overwhelmed me, stripping away any last shred of reason. My body convulsed in terror, unable to scream, unable to do anything but retreat further into the corner. I had nowhere left to go. And then, just as the shadow was about to reach me, it suddenly stopped. The silence that followed was deafening, as though the world itself had paused. I stared at the shadow, scarcely breathing. You are next. The words cut through me like a knife, driving deep into my chest. I barely had time to process them before the shadow lunged at me with impossible speed. I flailed my arms in a futile attempt to block it, but the shadow passed through me as if it were made of smoke, penetrating my body and lodging itself deep inside my chest. A bone-chilling coldness immediately spread throughout my entire body. My vision blurred and my mind grew hazy. I could feel the shadow wrapping around my heart, squeezing tightly. Each beat grew slower, more labored, as if the life was slowly draining out of me. Before everything went dark, the last thing I heard was that horrible, mocking laughter echoing in my ears. We are one now.